All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Today is March 17th, 2015. And this is the KNKL Show, episode 213, 214. I'm your host, Kienan Lafferty, and today is Tutorial Tuesday, where we learn to be better artists. And today, what we are going to be doing a tutorial on is creating particulars for video games such as League of Legends. I have broken down my process. I finally figured out a process, and I broke it down into a few simple steps, and I'm going to teach you guys how to use some very simple tools in Photoshop, and you too can create your very own particles. For League de Leyendos. But before we get into that, we got some announcements to make, and that is if you head on over to Skillshare.com, if you're watching this on YouTube, all right, there should be a link down in the description, and you'll notice that, hey, whoa, what are these projects going on over here? Are these my students? My students from my class on Skillshare.com? Yes, it is, in fact. People joining up on the Webcomics Challenge. We are up to about, I think we're up to past 100 students. Yes, we're at over 100 students. So if you want to join up and learn how to create your own webcomic characters and get one-on-one feedback from yours truly, just click that link down in the description on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're on Twitch, I will post a link to you to go check that out. But yes, you should come join up and have some fun with that. All right. Last thing we need to do is go through the lovely lane. I can tell like I'm getting caught on my tongue. Like I got a cat catching my tongue right now, and I need to get past it. Blah, 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 blah. Usually I do vocal warm-ups before these things, but the whole Twitch thing going down kind of screwed with the whole setup anyway. But you guys are awesome submitting your artwork. Look how beautiful this stuff is on the lovely lane. Thank you to everyone who has come. And if you want to see these pieces for yourself, just type in that tiny URL. Again, the Facebook link is in the description, and you can come get cookies. All right, people, that's enough blabbing. Let's go ahead and get into the tutorial. The tutorial. Oh my gosh, I cannot talk for the life of me. I'm dying. Dying on the inside. But now I'm feeling better because I'm going to teach you guys something really awesome. All right, guys. So as you can see, we've got a backdrop of League de Leyendos right here. Summoner's Rift 2.0. And we're going to be talking about how to create particles. This was suggested by an amazing viewer last week when we were doing our tutorial on lighting, colored lights. And I forget exactly who asked for this, but it was a great question talking about particles, and we're going to be talking about that today. All right, so let's start with the basis of it, of what I'm going to be teaching you, and then we're going to do some real-time. We're going to do some real-time spell effects. And this is going to be broken down into probably about 4 layers, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and open these layers over here. See how we have this whole group called fire? Click it off, it goes away. Click it on, it comes back. All right, so here's what you're going to do. So the top layer, this is going to be set to hard light, okay? This is your hard light layer. This is where all the magic comes in, sort of like the glowy effects. And this is the thing that I tell you guys to be careful with because it is very addicting. And this is what I really feel that a lot of people forget to do in their spell effects, because if you just try to paint a spell, it'll oftentimes look a little flat, a little bit boring, but we use the power of Photoshop to get the work done for us, right? Okay, and then we're going to be moving on to, right, layers. Layers, I think, is one of the most important things that you can do when you're creating particles. But even more so, this is something that I talked about last week, was starting with a dark base, right? Notice how this dark almost looks like a brown, spermy, smoky thing, right? But you get the idea. You want to start with a dark base and then lay on top of it the fire, okay? You're going to start laying on top of it different fire effects, okay? And the reason why you do this is because it will actually make it appear more bright and more vivid with your light, okay? So for example, if we take this away, you can see how immediately it starts to kind of blend into the background. See, it loses a lot of its power. It doesn't really feel very powerful. And the reason why that is because in order for something to look bright, you must have something contrasting against it in the back. All right. So that's what the dark does, and you want to remember that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on into lightning really quick. So there's fire. Okay, there's fire. And actually, before we move on to the lightning, let's just recreate this. Let's recreate the whole thing. And let's start with, let's make a different color fire, because using the same principles, let's make a different color fire, okay? So let's go ahead and choose our dark base, okay? So here's what we're gonna do. All right, so let's go ahead and make our dark starting point right here. In fact, I want it to be even darker than that. Make it dark like that, okay? And then you're gonna go ahead and just bring it back. Very, very simple. You can even do like a little bit of the smoky thing. That's more of like an After Effect thing. I do that later, but for the most part. And also the other thing that I want you to notice is that I'm working with just my soft brush. I worked with the soft brush for basically a lot of the initial sketching phases. Don't worry about making really, really hard shapes at the beginning. Okay, so here's our start. Beautiful, beautiful. Looks like a ghostly microphone. All right, so let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so we're gonna create a new layer over top of it. And I'm gonna ask you to find a good, like, think of your flame, but think about the darkest part of the flame. So you wanna have it be very saturated, I found helps too. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Create a new layer. And I am dropping frames all over the place. I hope the stream is not looking too bad for you guys. I have my Masha over and she is watching Netflix outside. So I don't know, our good little internet might not be able to handle that. But anyway, moving on. All right, so here you go. So you're gonna go ahead and start dropping in your semi-bright color. Okay, like this. And what I want you to do here is consider shapes. I really want you to be focusing on shapes and style here. Okay, so kind of like draw a little bit of it in. Again, remember, we're on a separate layer. Okay. And then what I'm gonna ask that you do is go in and start kind of carving it. Like, again, sculpting. I really like to do sculpting at all points of my drawings, even in my particles, okay? Because you wanna get some cool shapes is what we're going for. We're looking for some cool shapes. And this is also going to be a bonus tutorial on color temperature, because you might be asking me, how do I make a blue flame look hot? And I'll show you exactly how to do that. All right, and you'll notice how even towards the tip of it, I'll actually make my brush a little bit larger and allow some of that blue to kind of spill out into the darkness right there, okay? So there you go. There's a good starting point. Good, clear read, nice shape, got some nice style. All right, moving on to the next part. This is where we're going to talk about color temperature. So you'll notice in the shadow, we're towards like these dark purples and like these indigo colors. As we move upwards in heat, what we're actually going to be doing is transitioning towards like the greens. And this has to do with color temperature. The hottest part of this flame is actually going to be like a light teal. And you'll see we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, we're going to be hovering right around this area. Right around that area. Okay? And we're once again going to make a new layer. And let's go ahead and drop some of this stuff in here. Okay, so an idea that I have actually is I want to do something like this. I want to actually create like a flame like this, but have it sort of have a hollow center. Like a hollow center, so it kind of looks like this. It might look like a ethereal, ghostly flame, you could say. Okay? Again, just playing around with a couple ideas, because really that's what this is all about. You're experimenting, trying to find something that works for you. Works for you and works for your client. Okay? So it's almost like a flame within a flame. A flame within a flame. Yeah, cool. And again, my tip to you guys is consider the versatility of the soft brush, because what I like to do is when I'm creating glowy effects, I like to make the brush very large. But when I want to make hard edges, I'll just shrink the brush down, and then see, automatically makes a hard edge. So the versatility of the soft brush is quite astounding. Okay, so let's go ahead and get some of this in there. Let's even just have it like, there can be like some little connecty points like going through here. Little offshoots. I found little offshoots actually helps. So that's kind of like, think about little embers that would come off of it. I almost like to think of this as noise. I like to call it noise. Having a little noise coming off of your particles adds some extra flavor to it. And it makes it look cool. So, I mean, can't argue with that. Can't argue with that. All right, now another thing that I like to do is I've taught you guys about locking layers, locking transparent pixels. And I'm going to ask you to click that magical button once again, because here's another cool thing that you can do. Say you, okay, so here's a good example. Say you paint like really bright like lines down here, and you think it's like, oh, that looks a little bit too bright, but I like that shape, but I want it to be a different color, right? So that's where you lock your pixels. And then oftentimes what I found that remedies this situation is if you just pick a darker color and then you just simply paint that shape. Like you can paint that color, or rather paint that color on that shape, okay? So then you'll get something like this. You can even bring it back down to like the smoky color if you'd like. So you get something like that. If you did. And then if you want it to be less opacity, you can go back in and erase it too. But just make sure you declick this. This is your magic button right here, okay? So use this button to your advantage. Okay, so I'm actually going to erase a little bit of that because it didn't look good. That was more for just example. It was just an example. Okay, but also a little thing that I'm going to do here is I am actually going to increase the temperature of the flame at the front. Okay, so I'm going to do that again by locking those pixels. And again, we've moved towards those greens. Let's add some extra heat to various parts of that. All right. Now I'm going to create another layer, and now we're going to start moving into sort of what I call the blowout, right? The blown out parts of your particles. And this is where you're going to start going towards white, getting very close to white. And again, we're moving towards those teals and greens. This is sort of like the final process before we're going to start moving into the glow, okay? And you can make this on another layer. Sometimes I keep it on the same layer as the one prior to it, but again, it's just really important that you work with layers, and I'm going to show you why in just a moment. I'm going to show you why that is really handy to work in layers in just a moment. It will blow your mind. It will, in fact, it will blow your mind. But that is saved for about 45 seconds from now. All right, so I'm really just focusing on making the tips of any of these embers or like the noise like white hot. Okay, and I have a little in there, a little there, a little there, right? It's kind of trusting in my instinct. And if I don't like it, the cool thing is that you can erase it. You can erase it away without having to worry about destroying your work. And that makes us happy. All right, now it's time for the funnest part. It's time for the funnest part, and that is the hard light, guys. This is why all of you showed up. I'm gonna reveal to you my secret, and that is the hard light layer. Okay, so create a new layer, and then right here where it says normal, you click that because we're not normal artists. We are hard light artists. We're gonna go ahead and pull that up. We're gonna go ahead and pick basically the middle color, right? So like this blue, right? This blue. And then what you're going to do is you want to think about, again, do not get addicted to this because it's like a bad drug. You just use it sparingly. Use it sparingly. Use it only when it is called for, and right now it is definitely called for. Okay, now what this is going to start doing is it's going to start making everything glowy. Okay, and it is a very subtle thing, right? In fact, I'm going to make it brighter than that, especially up here. Make it really bright. So basically, you can see what this does. It's got an interesting transfer effect to it. In fact, it doesn't really show up too much as the blue or on a blue. But hang on, is that actually working? I think we actually picked our colors fairly well. That way, the hard light actually doesn't make that big of a difference. But regardless, see, okay, so you can see it clearly what's happening right here. So this is like that final little glow that you add on to it. And this will, in my opinion, more often give that final bit of life that your particle needs. Sometimes they feel a little bit flat, but this will oftentimes make up the difference for it. And then the other cool thing about it is usually by the time I'm to the hard light, I'll start adding in more like little particles and just like little things. I don't know, it's sort of like an overpaint layer, a final overpaint, as well as just make everything look cool layer. So there you go. Let's go ahead and get that in there. And it just looks freaking awesome. Would you not agree? And there you go. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is sometimes you might notice that your initial thing, the dark base, I like to call it the dark base, or the dark, I don't know, what's a good name for it? It's the thing that goes on the bottom, the bottom bread piece. The dark bread, the toasted bread, might be a bit overwhelming, right? Because it looks just a tad, because your point here is that you don't want it to look like it's like a dark energy, unless it's like seriously like void energy, you know, from the game. It's just meant to be there to make the particle look brighter. So oftentimes what I'll actually go back in and do is I'll go back in and erase slightly around the edges of it, make it a little less overpowering. I might even go into the opacity and like lower it down a little bit, just enough so that way it has contrast. That's what you're going for. Just enough so it has contrast and it allows itself to glow. It allows itself to glow. Another thing that actually helps is sometimes to paint it, to actually lock the pixels on this dark bottom piece and actually paint it. That sometimes will add some extra glow to it as well. But I've found sometimes it works and sometimes it just gets a little bit too cloudy. You know, it looks a little too cloudy, whereas this feels more magic-y, whereas this feels softer. So it's really up to you. It's more of just like another ambient layer that helps it to have contrast. That's the most important part, is it just creates contrast. And in this case, I like that. All right, so last thing that we're going to talk about before we move into questions, and I will dissect the lightning as well to show you. Let's talk about one of the most important reasons why you want to work in layers. Why would you want to work in layers, Keenan? Why would you ever want to do that? Well, here's the reason why. Because when you send off these particles, no doubt your team is going to give you lots of great feedback. And they might come to you and say, hey, you know what, Keenan? Yeah, let me make sure everything is good. Okay, good. Okay, you guys are asking questions. Questions are coming up in just a second. But let me talk about layers. Okay, feedback comes, and they're like, Keenan, you know what? These are great. But now our champion is actually going to start... is going to have like green flame, right? It's going to have like a green flame. And so you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. So let's say that I created this all in one layer, right? It's like, well, I got the solution for that. Let's just use the hue tool and just go boom, right? Oh, like purple looks kind of nasty. All right, but that's okay because we wanted it to be green. Okay, well, actually that does work. It does work if you do that type of thing. Actually, that looks really cool. I like that a lot. So hue tools also work if it's all on one layer. But again, sometimes like when you hue shift to like different things, like especially like, see once you start going to like the yellow, the way that it like starts making the hotter colors darker, like an orange, this is where you'll start to run into problems. And then it's like this greenish like smoke. You can't always rely on the hue tool, and that's why I'm going to recommend. Same thing with like the purple. See, purples and yellows, it tends to look really weird. So here's where, again, if the hue tool works, go ahead and do that. But this is a guaranteed way that will always work for you. And it allows for a lot of adjustment too. And this is probably more so what you're going to get when you work with a team. Is they're going to say, hey, we want that flame to be blue on the outside and then go to like a yellow, right, on the inside. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. So now because you have all those things in layers, you can adjust each of these things by the hue, okay? So now you can be like, okay, well, let's go to yellow, right? Let's go to yellow with this. Okay, so like that. And let's go ahead and take these little thingies. And you can go through layer by layer. Go through layer by layer and adjust your values, right? Your values and your colors is what I meant to say. And you can fine-tune all of your particles. And let's go ahead and adjust this a little bit more towards like the teal side, because that would probably go better with like a yellow. Okay? So that is why I ask you guys to, oh, and if we're going to do that, we need to change the bottom bread piece, the toasted bread piece. That needs to go a little bit more green as well. There we go. And that is why I ask you guys to work on separate layers. That way you can make easy adjustments and all that good stuff. All right, so I think you guys know what time it is. I think we know what time it is. It's time for the question catapult. Hit the button, catapults. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please cast your questions over the castle walls, as has been instructed in the video. As has been instructed in the video. And in the meantime, let's talk about lightning. Let's talk about lightning, because I did say I was going to do this. All right, lightning. Lightning. Now, lightning is a very different one because, again, all of these things that I taught you today, I want you guys to understand the most important thing is the layering aspect, okay? Because the lightning would actually not work with that darker bottom piece. I found that lightning actually works very well if you don't have a darker bottom piece. See, because if you make the bottom dark, like it looks okay, but something about it just feels a little bit off. It feels like dark lightning, or just like, I don't know, it doesn't really work for me. What actually works better in this case is to paint that the bottom piece actually looks like this. It's actually extra bloom. It's extra glow that's actually happening to it. And then, but after that, everything is basically the same. So you got your lightning shape, layer 1, your particle shape, and then you start adding on the temperature. Add on that temperature, and then you have your hard light mode, which makes everything glow. And there you go. You have a lively, sprightly lightning bolt. All right, questions coming in. Questions coming in. Can you ever have too many layers? Chris Bravo 8 says, I usually try to keep it around like 4 or 5. You don't want to get too many layers because then you got to adjust every single one. Like if you need to change a particular thing on the particle, you like that? All right. So yeah, try to keep it down to like 4 or 5. I found is the magic number. Hamzilla says, what if you wanted to make icy particles, but it looked like blue flames? I think really what it makes it look like a blue flame is not so much the colors that you use, but it's rather going to be your shape language, okay? Because, for example, like you can see how this feels like a flame, not because of the colors that we used, but it's more so just the shape, right? Because you could use those same colors and make it look icy, and it would basically be the same thing. In fact, I think I will do a little, where the heck is my stylus? I will do an example of that whilst because I'm all about integration, whilst I take this next question. Let's see. Next question. How would you do technomancy-like effects? Something like someone trying to control a machine with nanites or some sort of techie theme. I'm not sure exactly how I do that. I probably incorporate, like, you want to think about all the elements that are incorporated in it. So obviously you would have like little miniature robots, right? But then you would also have the lightning effect. You would have like electric effects. And then based upon, I mean, it could be like green lightning that would make it look more like living electricity, or the life that gives the nanites their movement. All right. But we do need to talk about this icy thing. Okay, so basically for ice, I would do the same thing. And this might answer somebody else's question. It's talking about depth, adding depth to the particles. And I would agree. Let's talk about adding depth to particles, because they feel like they're sort of floating, which they should feel like they're floating. But also you want to have like multiple areas of depth. Okay, so here's what I would do for ice. Okay, same thing. Let's have like multiple ice shards heading towards our opponent. Okay? Now let's go ahead and choose our shape. New layer. There we go. And let's have it be like icicles. Okay? So we're going to have like this, right? Creating our shapes. And again, we'll do it like that. We'll have like little snowy effects coming off of it. Sort of like an ice lance. Think of it more as your communication with shape. That's what I always like to think of it as. And again, think about the trail. Think about the trail that it would leave behind. I imagine it being sort of like a snowy, like a wispy sort of snowy theme going on here. All right. So now what I'm going to do is, again, lock our layer. And as many of you know, the way that you create ice, actually, you guys might not know this, but I'll teach you a really easy way to create ice. Okay, so the way that water or just watery things work is it's sort of like a backwards shadow. So wherever your light is coming from, you want to paint darkness on top of it like this, okay? Paint darkness. And then you have lightness on the bottom. So it's like a reverse shadow. But then, and you can do this on a new layer, your highlight or your lightness is actually, or your specular rather, is going to be on the other side. Okay, so you'll have something like that. Very impressive, no? And there you go. Okay, and actually I'll make the tips of the ice a little bit brighter as well, kind of heading towards us. Yeah, I like it. And then to make it look magical, what I'll do is I will make this part, or the temperature of this underneath the icicle, a little bit brighter, so it feels a little bit more magical. So like that, and then we're going to add in glow on that. Okay? So now let's do the final layer. And let's put in our hard light. If you want it to be magical ice, which I guess in this case it would have to be, because I mean you're seriously like shooting ice out of nothing, right? So there you go, just like that. And then again, go back to our lower layer and kind of just determine how much you want that darkness to be there, if it even needs to be there at all. I always like to have just a tad bit. Maybe not so much back here, actually. We don't need that much back here. But what I will do is I will make these back particles a little bit frostier. A little bit frostier. There we go. Frosty, frosty goodness. Cool. All right, so that's how I would do that. And then to add depth to it, really it just has to do with thinking in like a 3D space. So I found that, again, overlapping, if you wanted to overlap like another icicle on here, like one that's closer to us. I mean, I'm just kind of penciling this in really quickly, or just drawing this in really quickly. If you have things that overlap each other, I think it would really come across in the animation because you would see like different particles like overlapping. But just having different parts of your particle overlap will create depth. All right, but that's basically what I would do for that. All right, last question, and then we're going to end today's show. Deathdraw is asking a good question. What is your opinion on using smudge or liquefy to do these effects? I personally have not done it that much, but especially because they're all on different layers, I found that smudge and liquefy works good when you're working with one layer. But to my knowledge, I don't think you can do... Can you do liquefy on multiple layers? Let's find that out. Like if we do this group and then do liquefy. Yeah, it doesn't even allow me to do it unless I pick one. Right? Right? Yeah, so if you do have liquefy and you do create a particle on one layer, or you can like flatten it, if you do like what you're going with and you want to flatten it and then kind of move things around, like you can do that too, because I can see how this could be useful. So you can do whatever the heck you want, whatever works for you. In fact, that does look kind of cool. But my suggestion is if it works for you, then do it. That's the way I do it. I just showed you my personal technique for this, and you do whatever the heck floats your dang particle boat. All right. I'd like to thank you guys so much for joining me on Twitch live, people on YouTube as usual. Thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't. My name is Kienan Lafferty. I will see you guys next time. Do not forget, if you guys want to learn how to make some comics, then come on over to Skillshare. Come join the other awesome students and make some comics with us. Look at this. You can post your projects right here and get featured on the front page if you post now, because this class is getting a lot of hype, and I really appreciate you guys for joining up and doing that, because you guys are freaking awesome. All right, that's enough for me. Yes, I will. Oh, and people on Twitch, I'll get a link to you in just a moment. But you guys take care of yourselves. Until next time, stay awesome.